Hi there. Welcome to part 22 of my series poring over every piece of music in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. How are them sea legs treating you? We've still got a few more episodes left on the Shinra 8, so keep that life jacket handy. Let's dive in. It's time to get this Queen's Blood tournament started. As the ever-chatty Captain Titov introduces everyone to the rules of the tournament, we get our first track of the episode. This is QB Tournament Round 1, and as the name implies, it plays throughout the entirety of the first round of the tournament. And, as you can probably guess, it's the first of many tracks in this tournament. We've heard a couple jazz-inspired tracks so far, such as the original Queen's Blood track and Ra Ra Roach a couple episodes back, but this one here has a softer, more traditional setup and energy. Unlike the manic intensity of those two prior ones, this one sounds like something a lounge band would play in a cafe, a bar, or hell, a lounge. So it's a perfect tonal match for The Hold, the swanky bar inside the cruise ship / ferry where the tournament's taking place. The track has a few similarities with Queen's Blood jam sessions, which we just covered before in part 21. Both tracks use a simple band setup, in this case a drummer, bass player, and pianist, while two lead instruments pass the buck back and forth, exchanging solos and occasionally harmonizing. In Queen's Blood jam sessions, it was an exchange of an electric guitar and a saxophone. While this time, a trumpet and a saxophone. There's also an extremely interesting, whispery female vocal line at the very beginning of the track, but it's easy to miss it, what with Captain Titov blathering above it. Yeah, a lot of mouth sounds in there. If someone could add ASMR to Rebirth's list of tags on Steam, that would be swell. Thank you. But can anyone make out what she's saying? I've listened to this little intro many times and I still can't make out a single word. I can't even tell if it's in Japanese, English, or something else. Anyhow, the dueling wind instruments are the main draw of the track, but its heart lies in its lead piano. We hear it throughout, including in the introduction of the Queen's Blood leitmotif. The importance of piano in this track, and several of the upcoming ones, should come as no surprise, since it's very likely it's the track's arranger that's playing it. This is Shota Watanabe's first arrangement in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and like Miki Hirose in Part 20 with Ra Ra Roche, I think it's his first experience working on a video game. He doesn't even have a VGMDB page, so you know he's super fresh. Shota Watanabe is a Japanese pianist, composer, and arranger with his finger in many pots. He's put out several pretty damn fantastic J-Jazz albums under his own name, which blend his more traditional Rebirth jazz sound with the occasional pop and fusion ideations. His history as a collaborator is just as prolific, having played in several bands throughout his still young career, such as the jazz funk band Akamon, and having put out a duo album with Marty Holoubek a couple years ago. He's also in the J-Jazz band Steam Engine, which also features the bass player Keisuke Furuki, whose name shows up in a long list of bass players in the Rebirth credits and soundtrack liner notes. As a result, it's probably safe to assume Furuki is the one playing bass on Shota Watanabe's Rebirth arrangements. This track's composer is Mitsuto Suzuki, which makes sense considering the appearance of the Queen's Blood leitmotif. Like with Miki Hirose's involvement in Ra Ra Roche, I think Watanabe's appearance in Rebirth is thanks to Mitsuto Suzuki as well. Since Suzuki often performs live in his band Mohera, with Nozomi Toki aka Non, he seems to have his eye and ear on the pulse of Japan's, or maybe just Tokyo's, live music scene. Maybe that's how a big AAA video game like Final Fantasy Rebirth is able to get these gifted, niche jazz musicians with no past experience in the games industry. Oh, and speaking of Hirose and Ra Ra Roche, in that video, I got a comment from the viewer Solaslo, is that how I say it? Who pointed out that I missed the reference in that track to the Chapter 4 remake track, The Red Zone. That one went way over my head. Good catch. Anyhow, there's also another connection between the two jazz musicians. Shota Watanabe was featured as a special guest on Miki Hirose Jazz Orchestra's 2021 album Relight Delight. So it's very possible Mitsuto Suzuki only had a connection to one of the two jazz musicians, and that the other joined Rebirth because of the first's involvement. Maybe. However you slice it, I'm extremely grateful for both their involvements, and I hope they'll return in Remake Part 3. As I mentioned earlier, the bulk of this track is a trumpet and a saxophone. You know, considering their history, I wonder if it is the Miki Hirose on the trumpet here. There are definitely some fantastic lines in there. Although unlike the jam session track, I think the two instruments sound best when they're working together and harmonizing. Very nice. Once you've selected your round 1 opponent and the match starts, this track continues to play, which makes this the first instance of a Queen's Blood card game that doesn't employ the regular Queen's Blood theme. Although after the match it plays the usual victory, loss, or draw track. Afterward, because Rebirth is Rebirth, there's an additional track that plays after your round 1 battle, but before you start round 2. This is an even more leisurely post-game track, and one that didn't make it onto the Rebirth original soundtrack. Although it shares many similarities with the Round 2 post-battle track, which we'll get to soon, which lets us surmise a few possible truths about this one here. For one, since the Round 2 post-battle track is officially called QB Tournament Round 2 After Party, we can fairly definitively conclude that this track will be called QB Tournament Round 1 After Party. I think it's specifically because of how similar these two tracks are that they decided to omit this one from the soundtrack. It also shares some similarities with the prior two Queen's Blood tracks we covered. The most obvious is, of course, the many references to Suzuki's original Queen's Blood theme. But the other is that this track also follows a similar duet format, although this time we have a trumpet and, I think, a viola. It's a fun juxtaposition, made even more interesting by the fact that the tone of both instruments seems particularly affected. The trumpet has a much thinner, brighter sound, which is the result of sticking a straight mute inside the trumpet. Doing so gives the trumpet a very different, distinctive, sort of sultry tone than what we're used to hearing. And not to be left out, the viola also has a somewhat unusual tone. It sounds like it's been mic'd real close to the source, giving it a pretty thick, almost electric tone. At points, it sounds more like a virtual instrument than a real one. But at the same time, the expressivity of the playing sounds maybe a bit too good for virtual? But it wasn't just because of the viola I wondered if this track could be virtual. The drums are fairly repetitive and much heavier in the mix than in the confirmed Watanabe tracks. You can also hear a few points in the cymbals where they unnaturally restart. These are extremely minor nitpicks, which I only bring up as part of my latest crackpot theory that this round 1 after party track might not be arranged by Shota Watanabe, but instead by its composer, Mitsuto Suzuki. While this sounds like a dig at Suzuki because this track sounds lower quality than the confirmed round 2 after party Watanabe track, I think what we are actually hearing here is Suzuki's temp or mock-up track that he gave to Watanabe to base his round 2 after party track on. The biggest clue that this round 1 track is a mock-up for Watanabe's round 2 track is that, well, if you line up both audio files and play them simultaneously, you'll notice they're not only in the same key, the same BPM, but also have all the same chord progressions and melodies, down to the same beat of each bar. The only point where they deviate is at bar 51. Here, the round 1 after party track moves to the outro, but the round 2 after party track takes a detour with a 16-bar piano solo. Before then returning to the same outro. Sorry, I know I usually don't play songs out of order, but forgive me this one time since it'll better convey the similarities between the two tracks. It would explain why the two tracks are structurally so similar. It would explain why the former sounds like a mix of live and virtual instruments and pre-recorded loops, while the latter sounds like 5 extremely gifted jazz musicians. And most crucially, it would explain how they could justify having so many damn good jazz tracks for such a brief, inconsequential segment of the game. I can't speak for everyone, but I definitely didn't linger very long in this liminal post-battle sequence. Like, as soon as I finished my last match, I immediately made my way to the front counter to bring on the next round of the tournament. Hard to imagine the boardroom meeting where they decided, or were able to convince someone higher up that, yeah, let's have a unique 4-minute long jazz track before and after each round of the one-off card game tournament aboard the boat. So yeah, it's not a dig at the quality of Suzuki's or whomever's track. It's more, I think his temp track was so good, they decided to include it in the final game. That's my theory, at least. Anyhow, speaking to the receptionist at the bar triggers the start of round 2, and along with it, our next track. It's round 2 now, and things are heating up, so it's no surprise that this track, QB Tournament Round 2, would be not only more energetic than the preceding after-party track, but also a fair bit livelier than the main Round 1 track. Shota Watanabe is once again the confirmed arranger, with the trumpet and saxophone once again doing a wonderful job trading off each other and coming together at key points. The blues influence is noticeably stronger in this one. There's even a huge minute-and-a-half long trumpet solo riffing atop a standard 12-bar blues progression. The strangest part about this track, however, is the, I think, complete lack of any references to the Queen's Blood theme, right? It breaks the trend of the preceding tracks, which is totally fine, but what's mysterious is the Mitsuto Suzuki composer credit. He wrote this track? Really? To me it sounds like Shota Watanabe and his musicians mostly just letting loose and playing around a couple ideas. But the writing credit implies Suzuki wrote that, which, sure, I mean there's no reason he wouldn't have been able to write it, but it's extremely rare to find a Rebirth track with a unique composition where the composer isn't also the arranger. So if this track is indeed a Suzuki composition and not Watanabe's, then there very well could exist a Suzuki-made mock-up track that Watanabe based this version of the track on. Also, this would conveniently lead credence to my crackpot theory about the prior track being itself a Suzuki-made mock-up. Either way, big shout out to the fun little disco breakdown during the piano solo. The hi-hats and four-to-the-floor beat make for easily my favorite part of the whole track.
Here we go!
After your round 2 victory, we transition into our next post-game track. This is the round 2 after-party track that I was speculating was based on the round 1 after-party track we covered earlier. They share almost the same structure, although this one is definitely scored by a full live band. Being a live version, there's a bit more improv throughout, such as a more relaxed opening, with the trumpet and piano beautifully playing off each other, and a nice little phrase by the saxophone. These little ad-lib phrases are par for the course for a standard jazz performance, but it's not the kind of thing you get a lot of in video game soundtracks, which are usually entirely, premeditated, if that's the right word. Like you have the sole arranger deciding what gets played where and when, with very little room for deviation or interpretation from the individual session musicians. It's also what you would expect going to a classical music concert. But that is not the expectation from a lot of jazz shows. You are getting musicians playing within an agreed upon template or song structure, sure, with key melodic passages and structures they intend to hit, but implied in the contract is a lot more room for individual expression. You hear it in the solos, in the chonky chords, the drum fills, and yeah, the little fill lines like the ones at the beginning of this track. These little embellishments give this track and the other Shota Watanabe arrangements a more authentically jazz feel within the entire Rebirth soundscape, especially when compared to the less developed Round 1 after-party track. Even though the two tracks are structurally almost identical, there is just so much more expression and individuality coming out of this one here. changes, we've substituted the muted trumpet and affected viola, or whatever that was, for Watanabe's usual band setup of a trumpet and saxophone. Like always, the trade-off of the two instruments sounds fantastic. I especially love this moment here where we move from a long saxophone solo right into a sax-trumpet duet over top a sudden but smooth key change. And I adore the solitude in the section that starts at around the halfway mark. The lone trumpet sounds so beautiful. The round 1 after party track also had this section, and it sounds great there too. But I think it's a real highlight in round 2. Also, once again, Mitsuto Suzuki is the sole listed composer, so if that's correct, I'm assuming he wrote that lovely passage as well. The man has some impressive jazz chops. Huge range coming from the stamp guy. Assuming Suzuki did make that part 1 after party mock-up track, that still leaves us with a new long Watanabe piano solo in this version, along with a fair bit of little embellishments coming from the session musicians. Chord inversions, new drum patterns, melody fills, etc. But the reason Suzuki is the only credited composer is because, well, those are just treated as jazzy solos, not bespoke additional compositions. Whether or not that's fair crediting, well, that's a whole other can of worms. Alright, we are about halfway through the Queen's Blood tournament, and honestly, the music only gets better and better. We've got some wild tracks coming up, but I'm gonna leave it here for now. In other news, in the last episode, I asked folks to submit their favorite track from Chapter 4. Happy to report I got plenty of responses, but I'm gonna hold on to those results until a few more episodes from now. I'd like to give folks a bit more time to submit their responses. Also, I have another request for you. Since that went so well for Chapter 4, I would love for you to now tell me your favorite track from Chapter 3. Yes, we might as well work our way through the preceding chapters as well. Chapter 3 is the party's adventure in and through Mithril Mine. You can rewatch my Part 11 video, which covers all of the music from that chapter, if you need a refresher. You can probably predict which chapter I'll ask you about in the Part 23 video, so you can start thinking about that one too. In a few episodes, once we're all caught up, or backed up, whatever, I'll go over all the results. It'll be a fun excuse to revisit some past hits from Rebirth. And speaking of the comments section, I also got a lot of comments from folks talking about the connection between the arrangement style of the Shinra 8 main theme of Final Fantasy VII track we covered last episode, and Celine Dion's smash hit My Heart Will Go On. I won't play any of that since I don't want my channel to get DMCA'd into oblivion, but I'm sure you can find it, or more likely already know it quite well. These comments are bang on, and it's a bit embarrassing I hadn't made the connection myself. I don't know how that went over my head. I have zero excuses, actually, since I wrote most of that episode on a flight to Nova Scotia at the beginning of the month, and the person in front of me was watching Titanic on their laptop. Also, the very next day, I went to the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic in Halifax, and they had a whole exhibit about said ship. I read a whole panel about the commercialization and revival of Titanic interest following the 1997 movie. So yeah, I was getting subliminal messages left, right, and center. I got no excuses. But that's enough for today. So please, let me know in the comments your favorite track from Chapter 3's Mithril Mine. In the meantime, please look forward to Part 23, which should be damn excellent. Okay, that's it. Take care. Bye.